Are you tired of putting yourself last? Of taking care of everybody else's needs and powering through to meet the next set of impossible standards? In our fast-paced society, we lose touch with our intrinsic worth, with the ability to value ourselves for who we are right now. Instead of living life exhausted, frustrated, and disconnected from your authentic self, maybe it's time to put yourself back in the life you've worked so hard to create. Join radio host and life choreographer Laura Cheadle and learn how to build your dreams and live your sparkle using the 5 steps of Flaunt. Find your fetish, laugh out loud, accept unconditionally, navigate the negative, and trust in your truth.
Hello, welcome to Flaunt, Build Your Dreams and Live Your Sparkle. I'm Laura Cheadle, and today we are going to talk about nutrition. Now, I know if you've been listening to my show for a while, you know how passionate I am about feeling good. I don't care so much about what people look like or how much money they make or what kind of car they drive. I care about how people feel, because I know that when people in my world feel really, really good, then their behavior tends to be better and they are happier. So for me, being healthy isn't so much like a badge of honor. It has more to do with living a life of joy, of tuning in, and of finding your sparkle. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Today, we are interviewing Jill Castle, and she is a pediatric nutritionist. She is a childhood nutrition expert. And oh my gosh, I love that, because when we feed our kids well, they're going to act better and they're going to grow better, and they're going to grow into adults who know how to find their sparkle and live their sparkle. Now, Jill's focus is on helping parents nourish healthy kids with healthy foods and recipes. She also helps parents use effective feeding strategies and establish healthy habits that last a lifetime. Like I said, it's all about a lifetime of joy and sparkle. She also helps other healthcare professionals learn about child nutrition so they can spread this wisdom to more parents. Jill has worked with babies. She's worked with toddlers, children, teens, in a wide variety of settings, from hospitals to private practice. And she also consults and she speaks. Now, she's done this for over 25 years, and she's got several ebooks and e-guides, and she also is the host of the Nourish Child blog and podcast. Now, of course, as you might have guessed, she is a parent too, so she has got plenty of real-world experience to share with you today. So with that, welcome to my show, Jill.
Thank you for having me, Laura. It's nice to be here.
I am so excited. Okay, let's start with a big one. How did you get involved in childhood nutrition?
That's a great question. Well, in college, I got interested in nutrition. And when you are interested in college, you basically study general nutrition. And when I graduated, I took the sort of traditional course and did an internship in a hospital. And during an internship, you get exposed to all kinds of different populations. So you work with the elderly, you work with critical care, you work in outpatient counseling, and you work in pediatrics. And I did a 2-week rotation in pediatrics, and I was just like, wow, these kids are so precious. They're so sick. The parents are so fragile. And I really just, I've always loved kids, but I really saw them as such a unique challenge, because not only do kids have pretty much every disease adults have to deal with, they have heart disease, they have diabetes, they have cancer, they have brain issues, but kids are also growing. So it's an added element and an added challenge. And I found that to be just a really fun and interesting avenue to explore nutrition. And then when you actually work with children, they're so unfiltered. They're truth tellers. They're a joy to work with. They're funny. Oh gosh, they bring me a lot of joy in my life and a lot of fulfillment working with them.
I bet. Now, here, when I was practicing law for a hot second, I was a guardian ad litem working with kids for many of the reasons that you mentioned. They're incredible. However, what I struggled with was the fact that kids are not autonomous beings and that they have to do what their parents say,
Yes.
Force them to do. How does that work with nutrition? Because in a sense, you're not working with a child. You have to work with the parent and hope that the parent does a darn good job.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sometimes I do get to work with the kids, and I try to as often as I can, but I do very much see my role as somebody who is there to enlighten, educate, and empower parents to do the best that they can with feeding their children. So many parents come into the job undereducated and underprepared, and they're sort of, making their way through raising kids without a strategy or a plan, and they're not sure if they're doing it right. And then you add in their own childhood experiences where they might have been forced to sit at the table and finish their green beans. They might have been punished if they didn't finish their dinner. They might have been, pushed to eat more because that was valuable to the parents at the time. And so what I realized is that, I very much am passionate about helping parents and empowering them, but I also understand that they come to the table with their own history. And sometimes we have to sort through that history to make sure that they are understanding how what they do and how their background influences what they do. And sometimes we have to change that and work on that and coach through that.
That makes so much sense because we do all have baggage, and oftentimes we're not even aware of that baggage. And from my own experience, I never thought about, fortunately, I don't have food baggage either. Fortunately, I wasn't forced to do a lot of those things, but there were many other things that didn't rise to my level of consciousness until my kids went through that phase. And then I went, oh, that was a painful experience when I was teased. Ooh.
Right.
So how do you do that coaching with the parents? I mean, I'm thinking for a listener out there who might think, yeah, I was a member of the Clean Plate Club and I was forced to be, and I'm doing that because that's what good parents do. How do you coach the parent? Because some of that is some deep psychological stuff. Some of it is some beliefs around good parents do that. And I survived, so my kids can survive. How do you work with all that? That's big.
It is big. And I love doing it. A lot of it is just awareness and education in a way that, I'm a parent too. I have 4 kids. I completely understand and appreciate how challenging feeding them can be. And the struggle is real, resistance and rebellion and all that stuff exists at the table too. And so helping parents understand their role in the whole process. So for example, I recently had a set of parents who, acknowledged right off the bat, my mother was controlling. I had to sit at the table and I eat my peas, and I will not eat peas to this day. And this is a parent that's in their 40s. And yet at the same time, the reason why she was coming to see me was she had what she felt were terrible eaters, extremely picky eaters, a very chaotic feeding environment. And what was so enlightening, I could recognize it right away because this is what I do and this is what I'm passionate about doing. But I could recognize right away that her chaotic feeding environment was very much directed to her permissive, lax parenting that came from being so controlled when she was a child. So helping her understand what she experienced in childhood and how, oftentimes when we're tightly controlled in childhood, we actually don't want to do that to our kids. So we become very loose. And we know, or I know, that children, to raise really healthy children who have a good relationship with food and who can self-regulate their food consumption, they need more of a love with limits structure around feeding. So it is structured. There are timings, timing around meals and snacks. There is a regular location. There is, positive talk at the table, and there is agency handed over to the child in terms of, this is how much, this is what I've made. You can choose to eat it or not. You can choose how much, and helping the parents sort of exit out of that struggle. I find that I'm telling parents a lot, all you have to do is decide the menu, cook the food, get it on the table, and then you're out of it. It's like, it's your children's job then to decide if they're eating and how much they're eating. So it is fun to enlighten parents of the connections from the past to the future, and to educate them and move them to a more positive way of feeding their children. But it's hard work. I say oftentimes, healthy kids, we don't raise healthy kids without great intention and strategy and systems, because they don't just happen. Like, parents really have to think it through. And when they're not thinking it through, they're oftentimes running into struggles. And, unfortunately, that's sort of, the way of the world today. Add on chaotic, busy schedules, and those underlying struggles around the table get magnified.
Yeah, there's so much in what you just said. There's like 5 things that I want to go back to, but I'm going to start with the beginning, that structure. For me, and I'm assuming for many of the listeners out there, they're thinking, feeding environment? What? I've never even thought about a feeding environment. I have meals. What do you mean feeding environment? So that's the first thing I'd love you to discuss a little bit more. What is a feeding environment? Why is it important? And what is the intent around creating that environment?
So the feeding environment is basically the food that you purchase, the accessibility of that food to the children in the home, the structure with which you offer meals and snacks, from the structure of the meal itself, what the food components are, to how long meals take, where they occur, and that whole vibe at the table. So if the vibe is full of pressure and punitive, for example, and there's a lot of just negative struggle around the table, that all of that impacts how well a child eats, all of it. So we know this from the research. If you stock your house or your kitchen with a healthy variety of foods, kids are more likely to eat a healthy variety of foods. If you have structure in terms of when meals happen, where they happen, we know that kids do better with self-regulation of intake. That means they recognize their appetite better. They eat to their appetite, and they get into a rhythm with eating and not eating, as opposed to grazing all day and never being full and always being hungry. And then we also know that what's said around the table and how a parent is interacting with their child, whether they're putting a lot of pressure on their child to eat more bites, or they're bribing their child with dessert, or they're restricting and saying, oh, honey, you've got a little extra weight on you. We're not going to let you have a second helping. All of that vibe, that interaction between the parent and the child colors how well a child eats and how they feel about themselves and how they feel about food. So the feeding environment is quite a big component of how successful parents can or cannot be around feeding their children. And in our country, honestly, we focus so heavily on the food. Like, what's a healthy, is this gluten-free? Is this healthy? Is this not healthy? We need more fruits and vegetables. We lose sight of the feeding environment, which is probably equally as powerful, if not more so.
That's an incredible statement because you're right. I think about my time in France or in England or in Italy. The environment is always beautiful around meals. And as Americans, sometimes I think we were almost not really snubbed. Snubbed is the wrong word, but it was noticed at how quickly we would blow through a meal. And yes, the environment there is much more conducive to being happy and to savoring the flavors than it is here.